which school, but somewhere in one of our schools in Jamaica, there's a guaranteed space for every child. This was not always the case. 30 years ago, if you were not lucky to get a government scholarship on sitting the common entrance, high school was not in your future. We have come a long way, but there is still much more to be done. Over almost a full year now, the Prime Minister commissioned this strategic study under the chairmanship of Professor Orlando Patterson. Members of the commission gave many precious hours of their time to chart a path for us as to what reforms need to be implemented to reverse the underperformance of the majority of Jamaican students in our schools. And I say majority because not all of our students are underperforming. So I want to pause to thank the chair, Professor Patterson, in absentia, and all the members of the commission for giving of their time and talent to education. That study, that strategic review, as you're aware, called the Jamaica Education Transformation Commission Report 2021, breaks down into 6 thematic areas. And I think I have some slides. The state of education, governance and accountability, the early childhood sector, teaching, curriculum, and teacher training, the tertiary sector, infrastructure and technology. The Reform of Education in Jamaica 2021 report was launched to the Jamaican public in January of this year with over 190 general recommendations, of which 54 have been prioritized as ones that will have the biggest impact and for us to implement in the shortest possible time. Given the timelines that I've given, we're about 6 months since that launch. And during that time, we at the ministry have taken this report into the heart of the Ministry of Education and Youth, to the various senior management groups and strategic planning sessions at Central Ministry and its regions. Because I believe we first have to know what is in the report, accept its truths before we can convince anyone else. We have to believe that the reforms recommended will result in more of our children becoming more literate and numerate, meaning that they have a good basic knowledge of arithmetic, able to understand and work with numbers, and that all these reforms will show tangible and visible changes in our education sector. Already, we've had various senior policy making group meetings at which we have interrogated our literacy and numeracy programs, as well as our higher education and special education policies. We've had working groups at the ministry deep dive into the thematic areas primarily to examine data and the adequacy of existing policies, identify enabling policy and legislative framework that would need to be put in place, including a philosophy of education to focus on our children's holistic development, ensuring equity in education, promoting a love for learning. Developing self and life skills in our students and having an overall impact on society with education. In seeking to identify gaps and immediate actions, we have already revisited the school improvement framework. We have revised our school supervision and monitoring checklists We've revised the school supervisory framework, and next step is to take a strategic review of central ministry and regional offices. Under every thematic area, some work has already been done. The Jamaica Teaching Council bill, which is being debated in Parliament currently, is a major recommendation of the Commission's report and is a visible example of work underway. The responsibility of the Ministry of Education and Youth is to carry on the implementation, bringing on board our students, our parents, our teachers, all the administrators and staff, and the wider Jamaican society. As everyone knows, the report is available to all Jamaicans. A series of virtual town hall meetings will begin. I'll also be laying this report in Parliament even while we continue the implementation. We have begun a collaborative approach to school supervision, school improvement efforts with targeted focus on 243 underperforming schools with team planning and monitoring to support growth plans. We have developed an operational plan which includes a national learning recovery plan, a national training plan for staff and teachers, and of course, a very robust monitoring and evaluation framework with quarterly review sessions, recovery scorecards, and supervision index for officers for improved accountability. As you're well aware as well, the early childhood sector has a significant focus in the Commission's report. It calls for a thorough institutional review of the Early Childhood Commission and for there to be improved services to children with disabilities and their families, and this review has begun. Already, we have identified the need for reclassification, realignment, and creation of critical positions, and we have taken steps to institutionalize the analysis of Jamaica's school readiness assessment. Under teaching, curriculum, assessment, and teacher training, a teacher policy will be prepared covering the entire teaching profession from infant to tertiary. The Commission recognized as well that what impacts a child's education is not just within the classroom, and so it presented recommendations for out-of-school factors, including conducting research on social protection coverage for poor children. We will collaborate with sister ministries and external partners to undertake such a research. There's also a recommendation to expand school leadership to include children because their voices matter. And for the first time, we will seek to establish a national entity that can help to do that. In infrastructure and technology, focused work is underway to address design standards and to establish a strategic infrastructure development plan. We will continue to push to get technology infrastructure into our schools. In the tertiary sector, the long-awaited higher education policy has never been closer to completion than it is now, including putting into operations a national qualification framework. Going forward with the announcement of the Oversight Implementation Committee, the work that we've been doing at the Ministry of Education and Youth will be more visible to the general public, who will be able to monitor the progress of the implementation of these many recommendations. As you heard the chairman say, he's laying the formal structure to hire on those professionals who will come in and ensure that all of the ministries work in concert to make sure that we implement this time around. We are committed at the Ministry of Education, and I've taken the few minutes that I have to outline for you the work that has already begun there. So I'm sure the next time when you hear the report from ETOC, they will not be simply reporting about what needs to be done, but they will actually be reporting on progress that would have already been made in many areas of the report from the Ministry of Education and Youth. So in summary, in all that we do, we must keep the focus on our students. Our education system exists to equip them for life's opportunities, to develop virtues that will enable them to lead fulfilling lives and build a better world, to perform optimally, to effectively pursue knowledge and flourish intellectually, all with a goal of our students becoming effective members of society. At the Ministry of Education and Youth, we are well aware that for this implementation to be a success, it must be integrated into the strategic business and operations plan of the ministry and to become a part of what we do day in, day out. We've spent the last 6 months carrying the message internally. We believe it has taken root this time. I know the expectations of the Jamaican public are high, so too are ours. We have an abiding commitment to do all we can to deliver a world-class education system. We know this will require sustained efforts over an extended period of time, but it falls to us to engineer that shift and to get those results. Thank you very much.
Minister, thank you ever so kindly for just giving us a very frank look at what's happening, and two, to commit to looking at all of the systems. You know, Jamaicans, we like nice things, and I always say nice things cost. But what is the cost of Jamaica moving from developing to developed world status? A good education system. And we all have to be committed to that. We all want good for our children, which means that we all want good for the future of Jamaica. So I'm very, very happy, and I think all Jamaica can be assured that it's not just one sector looking at it in a vacuum. It's several areas. Dr. Stokes spoke to it, Minister spoke to it, that we have several people drawn from several sectors of the society to ensure that it's all hands on deck, and two, that we get it right, not just for ourselves, but for our future. And I'm sure, Minister, that because you're a very strategic thinker and leader as well, that once we implement this, we will start seeing Jamaica move. Not just continue to do what we're doing now, not just continue to exist how we exist now, but to make tangible improvements, to move our people and our country and our economy to better. And so, ladies and gentlemen, especially those on our social media platforms and the Zoom platform, it's time for the question and answer section. I told you that the Minister and the Chairman would make comprehensive presentations, and then immediately after we'll open the floor for questions. And so it is now time to get to your questions. May I ask for those especially on our Zoom platform, please use the raise hand feature. I'm actually right now looking at that platform. So once you raise your hand, I'll be able to acknowledge you, and you will be able to ask your question. If you could introduce yourself so everyone certainly in the banquet hall is able to know who you are. For those reporters who are in the banquet hall with us, may I just ask that you raise your hand if you have any questions, clarifications, comments in terms of what either the Minister or the Chairman have said, please let us know. And so now, ladies and gentlemen, I open the floor to questions. Let me just make sure that I'm seeing everyone online. Yes. Are there any questions? All right, to the back. Is there an extra mic? I have that extra mic, right? Do I? All right, 1 second. Okay, yes, thank you. All right, so we do have a question in-house from TVJ, but if you could introduce yourself for us, we'll be able to take the question.
Morning. Hi, good morning. My name is Jamaica Maitland, and I'm a journalist at TVJ. My question is to the Minister of Education and then to the chairman. One would argue that the committee is behind, given the timeline that the report was released. I want to ask, how does the committee plan to, make up on some of these lost time? I saw the timeline that was, put on screen, but I want to ask, what happens now in the meantime? And two, the Patterson report outlined education or early childhood education as being critical, but also the government's level of funding inside the sector is woefully inadequate. There are a lot of unregularized early childhood institutions across the island, and the Early Childhood Commission recently did a report on it. How is the ministry planning on regularizing these institutions? Because at the same time, the report outlined that there is a balance between sending these children to school, but at the same time ensuring that they have quality education. How is the ministry planning on ensuring that there is a balancing act between the two, and also the commission?
Thank you, Jamila. Two very important questions. The Minister certainly will come and respond, and she did actually speak to the fact that the committee will also be looking at the Early Childhood Commission as well. But Minister, if you could.
All right, so many questions, right? Let me start with the timeline. Yes, the report was published some time ago. What I tried to give you in terms of my presentation is a sense of the work that has been done or is going on at the ministry. So we didn't just get the report and put it on a shelf. We took that report, dissected it. All our groups at the ministry, at the senior management level, would have participated in discussion on the report. What I asked of them to do as well is to go back in time and look at all the other reports, all the other recommendations that would have been made, and to itemize all those things that the ministry would have done some work on over the years so that we know exactly where we are. And we're really not starting from ground zero. For example, the Jamaica Teaching Council bill that dates back to 2004. There is, in fact, an entity at the ministry called the Jamaica Teaching Council, right? That was formed, and it's carrying out some work, but it just didn't have the necessary legislation. So that's an example of a recommendation, work that was done on the recommendation, but that wasn't carried all the way through. So that's something we're picking up here now in this report. That's an important recommendation of this report. So yes, there's been a lag in the time between the report being launched to now. But what I'm saying is there's work that is underway at the ministry, so we're not losing any time at all. Early childhood sector. It's an important sector. The early childhood sector was formalized some 20 years ago with the establishment of the Early Childhood Commission. And they've set about to modernize the early childhood sector because what existed in Jamaica for many, many decades is simply community-based basic schools. Somebody wakes up one morning and decides, I'm going to take care of some children, and in their living room or whatever space, they would take in people's children. And so since the establishment of that commission, you would have seen a formalization of the sector with standards, more trained professionals enter the sector, but there's still a whole lot more to be done. There are many institutions that still are not at the standards, and we're working with those institutions to help to bring them up to standard. The government is investing more as well in terms of creating more infant departments and infant centers attached to primary schools, especially infant departments attached to primary schools, so that there's surety that you have trained professionals in those schools. What is needed is an acceleration of all of that. In 20 years, we should have gotten way further than we are right now. If you look at the early childhood sector and you break it out between the private individuals who still operate basic schools and the government who is operating the brain builder centers, the infant departments and infant schools, it's about 75 to 25. So still about 75% private persons taking care of other people's children versus a government entity. And so the pace needs to be accelerated to build more infant schools, more infant centers for our children, and then you'll begin to see a significant change. And that, I think that should speak to your regularization of these institutions as well. And, so we recognize that the early childhood sector needs quite a bit, and it's going to cost quite a bit of funding to modernize it the way that it needs to be modernized.
Morning again, probably afternoon by now. So the committee was actually named, the Oversight Committee, that it was named in March. And I think one needs to understand that doing anything of this magnitude takes a fair amount of thinking and planning. And that's exactly what we have been doing. To pull this off successfully will require an operational structure to support not just ETALK, but the ministry and the entire government. And that's actually what we have been designing, and that's very, very important. The other key component is getting the right team, building, as I said, the necessary infrastructure. So but the people component is also very, very important. I spoke to the role of the Chief Transformation Officer, for example, that took some time to think through in terms of what are the competencies that we require. The organization in terms of accountabilities, how that role will fit within the ministry and so on. So what I like to use, and certainly in my private sector, we're in a private sector hat, when we talk about execution, we talk about what we call the flywheel principle, the flywheel principle. So at the get-go, it's very slow, as you know, as you try to turn a flywheel. It's very, very slow as you turn it. And it's necessary because it requires a fair amount of strength and building and so on. And that's what we're doing to ensure that we get it right with the infrastructure. But once the wheel gets going, it's very hard to slow down the flywheel, right? And that's a principle that we are operating under. So once we have a robust infrastructure in place, we have the right people, we have the governance worked out, and the implementation plan has been finalized and approved, then that wheel will get turning.
Thank you, Dr. Stokes. I like that analogy very much. I'd also like to add, too, and I heard it fairly recently again, it's something my own grandmother used to say to me, good things take time. We have another question from this side of the room, and for those who are online, remember, once you use the raise hand feature, I'll be able to see and acknowledge you, and we'll be able to ask your question. From this side, would you be able to introduce yourself and say the media entity?
Good afternoon. I'm Tanisha Mundell from The Gleaner. My question is, I'm not sure if it's for the minister or Dr. Stokes. You've mentioned that you have a development plan that is to be finalized. Can you say what are the areas that will be prioritized in that plan? And also, can you say what are the areas in which Jamaica can look forward to the earliest improvements and what will be done in those areas?
All right. Thank you, Tanisha. Good questions. Doc, I think we could start with you, and then Minister would. Okay, they're conferring. All right. Minister will come.
All right, so I'll take that ball. So I spoke about the implementation plan, and that plan effectively moves the partisan report to a project plan, effectively, right? In terms of prioritization, we have some ideas. Early childhood clearly is an area that is in need of great attention, and that is definitely an area that everyone is looking at. In terms of what will be prioritized or how things will be organized, we are waiting until we finalize the implementation plan to be definitive with the staging of the different initiatives around the recommendations. So what I will say is that at our next press conference, we hope to be in a position to state definitively what some of these priorities will look like in terms of when they will come on stream and when we expect completion of these various initiatives.
Okay, may I ask if there are other questions? Yes, all right, fantastic. There is the microphone right there, if you would, right behind. So there's another question. I see none coming online, ladies and gentlemen, in the banquet hall. So then we'll just take the questions internally. Lady in the floral top, yes. I'm sorry, could you just ensure that it's on for me? There's a green button that you should see. Okay, very good.
Good day, everyone. My name is Brittany Hutchinson from the Jamaica Observer. My questions are to Dr. Stokes and Minister Williams. So we're talking about transforming the education system, but there are still a lot of students who are missing from the education system. So I want to know if there are any plans to intensify the move to get those children back in schools and to remedy the learning loss, especially for those children. Secondly, I know Minister Williams touched on, plans for children with special needs. So I wanted to know what are some of the, disadvantages that have been highlighted through work from ETALK and the ministry, and how will those, probably resource deficit be addressed?
Thank you so much for those very important 3 questions. I counted. All right, Minister.
Okay, thank you for those questions, Brittany. In terms of the missing students, so you know that this school year that just came to during this school year that just came to an end, we had a significant program underway called our Yard to Yard initiative to find our students who were not showing up for school, and I believe we had good success with that program. Where we are now, though, we're back at pre-pandemic levels, meaning before the pandemic, if you looked at the numbers, on any school day, about 20-25% of our children are absent from school. And that's still where we are now. We've caught up and we're still at that point. We have to get those children back into school come the new school year, and you will see us with that program again. We're hoping to have better data in terms of attendance, especially during the first couple of weeks of school. So it will allow us to better target, better know who is absent, so that we can, go and engage them to find out what's happening in the home, what's happening with their parents, if their parents know they're not going to school, and so on. So it has been a major effort at the ministry, because obviously if we don't have them in classrooms, we cannot hope to educate them, and they would be the ones growing up not having the kind of education, and so therefore would be locked out of economic opportunities, and you know where that can lead. So it's a significant effort that will continue to be underway at the ministry. In terms of special needs, at the ministry currently we do have a special needs department that helps to coordinate all the work that needs to be done in our schools. We know that it's not nearly enough for the students that exist out across Jamaica. We want to get to a place where all of our students who happen to have special needs will be incorporated into our classrooms as best as we can. We want it to be an inclusive environment for those students, still recognizing that they may have these needs to be catered to. Just as an example, we've just completed the exam period, and there were almost 500 students with special needs who made requests of us, and it was granted, meaning a student may need a shadow to be in the exam, the student may need to be up front in the exam, just a number of different requests. They may need a language person. All the requests that came into us were fulfilled, and so we do have special sensitivity to the needs of our students. We don't have, the full build-out of the inclusivity just yet, but that's the goal, and that's the objective that we have. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Again, I'll put it out one more time. Are there any further questions, whether in-house or online? I see Jamila kind of shooting up her finger, which means that she does have one. Can I ask that the microphone just go over to Jamila so that we will be able to just get her question? And I believe we can wrap shortly after. Jamila, yes, you can turn... Yes, you can turn the microphone on as well for me. It's on mute. Okay, yes, go ahead. Mm-hmm. You know how it works. It has to go on green. There you go. All right. Is it? All right, while we get Jamelia sorted to ask her question. Okay, we are ready for her now, so let's do that and then we can wrap. Yes, go ahead.
Jamila again from TVJ. We are aware that the PEP exams, the results are scheduled to come out on Friday, and as much as it is, a passing grade for the students, one would argue it's a passing grade for the Ministry of Education as well, because it's basically showing, how the ministry performed as well, as much as the students, to ensure that they are ready, or the schools are ready for their exams. And I wanted to find out, how much of an impact will this be on the report, or how the committee, navigates the education sector. And two, I was looking at the committee members, and I thought of someone in law enforcement would be nice to add as part of the committee, being that we're seeing a lot of violence in schools. Safe schools is a priority as well. And we're seeing a lot of police officers, stationed at the gate. I think these are safe school officers. So I thought that would have been important as well. So those are my two questions.
Those are very thoughtful questions, Jamila. Thank you so much. I'm hoping that you weren't asking the minister for the stats on peppers yet, because they're going to have another press conference on that, but that's good. Yes, Minister, would you? No, it's not that. I'm sure that you'll talk about PEP in detail later on this week, but just the issue concerning. the impact of PEP on
So I
the
wanted
work
to
of the
find out
committee.
to what extent, the results from PEP
Yes.
would, impact the committee. Would it navigate, or would it impact whether or not, what direction you go to, what direction you focus on? Just what kind of impact you see the results of PEP having on the direction of the committee?
Gotcha. All right. Dr. Stokes will do that for you.
Yeah, no, thanks for the question. So I think that would represent a data point, right? It gives us empirical evidence of what is happening in the school system. Because remember, we're focused as well on educational outcomes, right? So having the PEP results and seeing how students performed, then it will give us very, very good indications, a good indication, I should say, on the work of ETOC and priority areas and so on. So it's a data point, empirical evidence that will guide how we operate. As it relates to law enforcement, keep in mind that there are many areas of the country or different professional groupings and so on that could actually be a part of the committee. But notwithstanding, because we are taking a collaborative approach, someone not being named to a committee does not mean that the committee won't reach out to have the benefit of the expertise or insights, right? And that's why we spoke about consultation being a key part of how the committee will operate. So we will definitely be reaching out to law enforcement and other relevant groups in the country to ensure, as I said, that we have the best ideas driving implementation.
All right. Thank you so much, Doc. Really appreciate it. I see no questions at all online. And for all reporters who are here, Jamila, you get 2 bites of the cherry, so that's nice. But I suspect you have no further questions either. But thank you so much for those thoughtful questions. I mean, especially when we're trying to improve the education system, I think that those questions were very much appreciated. So, ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Stokes, Minister Williams have committed to ensuring that we have consultation, dialogue, and constant upgrading and updating of what presently exists to ensure that we re-engage, reimagine, and re-engineer our education system. And it's so critically important. As we said, COVID has really done a number. Well, really, it's just devastated, the trajectory that we were on in terms of education. But again, in every crisis, find that opportunity. And this is the opportunity to ensure that Jamaica goes further and further in terms of our developed world status. May I thank everyone who is here in the banquet hall for joining us this morning, those online, our stakeholders and members of the media. Thank you so much for joining us for the first press conference of the Education Transformation Oversight Committee. We will have more. We are committed to engaging. We're committed to speaking with you. We're committing to ensure that you have regular updates. This is not something that will be kept in a silo, that will be kept secret. This is for the development and the betterment of Jamaica. So we want everyone on board, students, teachers, parents, community members. If you have a child in school, if your children done school, if you're just an elder in the community, everybody. It's all hands on deck. Thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you at the next press conference. Have a good day.